Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is my first Photoshop tutorial or breakdown. I'm going to do it on the Sebastian Vettel Ferrari montage edit that I did a few months ago. A lot of people ask me how I get the technique or the look to a lot of my graphics, so hopefully this helps you out. Hopefully this gives you a bit of an insight into like my workflow and how I do everything. So let's get into it. Alright, so this is Photoshop. I've used Photoshop for a very long time now, so I don't really use, I don't know, things like Pixelmator or Affinity. They're either too basic like Pixelmator, or I'm just so used to how Photoshop is and where menus are and different tools that it doesn't make a lot of sense for me, if I'm honest. So yeah, getting into it, you've probably seen a lot of the guides that I use. I like to just use them to keep things consistent, especially because we've got several different years of Formula One car here, so the regulations meant that different cars, different sizes, different wheel sizes, so putting the guide in here at the bottom just meant that everything is kind of placed properly on the ground. You can see that the shadows are in pretty much the same place, the wheels are in the same place. Most importantly, and this is kind of how I counteract the different sizes on the cars, is keeping the helmet size as close as possible to each other, because the cars might change but the helmet size shouldn't, and that means that it will come out looking a bit more sort of natural and a bit more actually to spec, if we put both of these cars together. So turn those off very quickly. Before I do that, margins, if we take one thing away from this entire video, is margins are so important. You want to have space between the edges on design, because it just gives things room to breathe and kind of make sure that people are looking at the middle. You don't want it to kind of feel clustered, or it's like falling off of the page or the screen or whatever it is you're designing for. When you're designing for a book, a magazine spread, etc., you're always going to have margins, you're going to have guides, because you've got to account for things like bleed. And yeah, it kind of carries over into the digital world. If you have a look on any sort of graphics that people put out, if they're you can tell how good they are if they use a margin and if they're consistent. And I think that is the key component to a good graphic: consistency across the board. So it's those little things that someone probably won't notice if they're not a graphic designer, but they'll kind of subliminally notice that things are kind of crammed in, or that they don't have enough room to breathe. So that's kind of a big thing on what I do. So I started on just a plain white background, found a grey tarmac looking texture, which ultimately I think sort of changed and kind of became a bit more of a desert. Added some sky in, did some messing around with camera raw filter just to kind of really bring out some of those colors, make it a bit more vibrant. The main man himself, Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion. Holla at your boy. I use a lot of, I guess, folders within folders, and the reason I do this is because I like to add individual levels and colors and things of that nature, adjustments to each individual thing after I've worked with it. So this is a smart object. This is Sebastian before I've done anything to the image. And yeah, again, it's just camera raw and adding some noise on top. If you don't know where camera raw is, it's in filter, camera raw, and this is quite literally like the most, like this is like Instagram filters on some kind of steroid. There's some kind of substance being used that kind of makes it look so good. And you can go into this and you can tweak everything and really sort of add an extra dimension to what would have started off as quite a flat image. Going through, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess, I guess, to people that don't understand it. It's a bit of a mess to me looking at it, but I know what's going on. And yeah, I like to individually add all these different components. So if I turn everything off, this will give you a bit of an idea as to how I've done it. So this was just to jack the brightness up because I felt like it was quite dark. The sun is coming from the right hand side in this image, so I just kind of felt like there's going to be more of a glow on his face. More curves. This is just so that I could kind of bring up more, even more brightness, but in a selected area. This is his eyes straight from the photo. And then what I did was I cut them out. And if you imagine that the sun is shining in his face, your eyes are going to obviously be like some of the brightest parts. And then I put a high pass filter over the top of it. On top of that, I've added some more glow. I would have pulled it from the color from the side, and that's just to reflect the fact that this is more of a pinky or creamy color here. So it make more sense that the color was actually the color of the sky and the sun. So this was quite rough, but this is a bit more blue because on this side it's a bit more blue. I mean, this whole thing is two-toned, which was what I kind of had in the back of my head. I just wasn't sure at this point if it was going to just be tarmac or how it would develop, but it definitely developed. It developed into a more desert-looking environment and more hue as well. So it's all about adding light, etc. Coming over into Seb with the trophy, it's going to be more of the same. Me cutting Seb out, adding camera raw, some noise on top of it, and really kind of blowing it up as well. I like to stack a lot of the blending modes in as well. These are really handy in terms of just kind of killing off a lot of the harshness of when I'm brushing in all of these highlights and subtractions, etc., that they're not so aggressive, because I'm all about subtlety, and I would rather have loads and loads of layers personally, with the subtleties in that I can kind of dial in and dial out, rather than if I turn these off, you've just got a black smudge over here. High pass, just to really kind of bring those details out, and there's a lot more contrast in the blacks, and high pass basically just exaggerates edges. And yeah, this will be Seb and everything I've done to get him to look like this. And then I like to then on top of it have external leveling, etc., so that it affects all of the other layers that I have inside, and they're kind of nested folders. Not everyone does this, I don't think. It gets a little bit messy if there's lots and lots of things going on, but I tend to, usually anyway, I will highlight folders just so I can see what's going on and which thing is in which section. But if you're just starting out, maybe don't do that, because it could be quite complicated and you kind of have to really sit there and work out what is what. But something I'll stress to you is keep all these folders managed, keep your layers named, because it just comes so much in handy in the long run, when you're not spending 10 minutes trying to work out what layer does what. Add some smoke in, and this kind of really brings a bit of life to it, I think. It's definitely made it a bit more interesting. So these are all just smoke layers that I have, smoke images. They might all be the same, but I've just moved them around, and then I've applied different blending options, as you can see here. An element of realism to the smoke, especially on some of the higher up ones where I've got them. Where is it? Yeah, so I've got that one on exclusion. It's created the darker smoke on top, which has given it a lot more texture and a lot more realism. And then I've got this purple aura thing that just creates more light, and it's kind of directional light going upwards into Seb's face, because obviously if I take it off, It's made it a little bit more flat, and now it's quite a realistic light source coming up. And we've got the cars. You know, it's going to be more of the same sort of nested folders within, where I've got the different cars and then the adjustments to all of them here within their own folder. So, you know, 2015, I've got a pile of adjustments here. You know, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I guess ones to note, selective color is really, really good. It's something that I've been using to just boost different colors or subtract them down a little bit, depending on, you know, sort of what I'm going for. But in this instance, if you look on the right, left 2015 car. Oh, I heard myself going there. You know, you can, if we set this back, turn it off, it's kind of a little bit washed out. And if I put it back on, I've kind of just really sort of increased the saturation specifically of the color red. So it's a really cool way to, you know, bring features in, or sort of kind of ease them out a little bit, which I tend to do on some of the tires, and just make them a little less in your face and a little bit more artsy, a little bit more like they've been drawn. Black and white filter is something I use a lot of. I usually slap that onto color dodge, and then I brush in highlights for wherever I want to have the highlights. You can overpower things a little bit too much with it, but yeah, as you can see, I usually dial it down to 75. Otherwise, you know, if I disable the layer mask, it will just blow out the whole thing, and that's a bit too much. But yeah, I mean, it's more of the same. I don't think I brushed half as much of the different lightings and stuff like that on the cars. These are in the foreground, Seb's in the background. It's more light on him, it's more important. It draws your eye straight to here rather than onto the cars, because he's the man of the moment, or at least was when I did this. So yeah, more adjustments. I'm always kind of trying to crank or subtract things. So this would, yeah, I've literally got this just on for some more exposure on the wheels, a bit more natural. And then this is probably the secret sauce, I guess. I've got lots of different overlays here. If I turn these off, and then we go through them, but you know, similar technique of adding it in, which is what this looks like normally. I've obviously brushed it here on the layer mask, and then yeah, just trying to find what one kind of works the best in terms of what I'm trying to do. And this is not, there's not really a rhyme or reason to why I choose the picture or the blending mode or whatever. It's just kind of whatever looks cool. So let me just turn these back off. So on this one, I went for soft light, which is like a very subtle light source. Be interested to see what this is. Subtract. So that's added a hue to the bottom. If you look at the actual image as well, it's quite a nice element of a rainbow kind of going on here. Very similar to like maybe a lens flare or something. But again, it's made this floor ground a bit more visually interesting than just a flat color. We've got this one, which is like a red tint. It's got some scratches, a bit more texture on it, but again, we've got this quite nice shape of light here. Yellows and oranges, which is obviously reflective of a Ferrari. And I've gone for a darker one here. This one's quite nice. I use this one quite a lot actually, and that just sort of dialed, because earlier I was saying, you know, this was like a creamy color. This has sort of really brought that contrast in now, and now it's a lot darker than it was before, which then plays into, you know, because you've got to remember, because this image, you know, is across the whole thing, it then impacts everything underneath it. And that is why, even though I did these highlights and everything else a certain color, it impacts everything, which then ties everything in together. And that is what really brings that element of realism into what's going on. You know, all that exposure I was doing to the side of his face and to the hat and his face down there. You know, it all looks realistic because they're all being affected by the same layer. So you've brought them all into the same, you know, world. These are photos from different years. different races, different parts of the world, day, night, etc. So doing this counteracts everything that, when you kind of stack those images up by themselves, it kind of removes that element of oh, that's a different photo from that place, and that's a different photo from that place. Now they all look like they've all been taken in the same place. This is just to brighten up down in the bottom, that kind of thing. This one's probably my favorite one because I've used it twice, but that again has just really exaggerated a little bit some of the colors down here, and then this one has just made things a bit darker. It really is a case of just stacking layers, stacking lots and lots of adjustments on top of each other. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much a run through of the PSD. But yeah, if you want any more insight, any more in depth on certain techniques I've used, or overlays, or anything from what I've talked about, then by all means either leave a comment, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. But yeah, catch you in the next one.